Hello and welcome to the February edition of Absolute Security's Patch Tuesday Updates, the show that gives you the rundown on the latest Microsoft vulnerabilities and crucially gives you the best advice on how to patch for them. In order to do that, of course, I'm joined by Rob Brown, Absolute Security's very own Patch Tuesday guru. And I believe you're going to highlight some kill chains, attack chains that this month's vulnerabilities have brought to the surface. Is that right?
That's right.
Over to you then.
Thanks, Justine, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us today for the March Patch Tuesday webinar. We really enjoy you joining us and the great feedback we get from everyone that helps us to improve these webinars. Thank you for joining me for the next 30 minutes, and we're going to go through priorities from Microsoft. But before we do, we're going to take a look at the Windows lifecycle. It's still such an important part of your cyber resilience to stay within support at the operating system level. Windows 10, well, that I'm afraid to say went end of life last year. If you're still using Windows 11, we highly recommend going to 25H2. It's very reliable. We've tested it. A lot of our customers are going to 25H2 now. That gives you the longest life. If you're using 23H2 still for Windows 11, you have until November this year, November the 10th, to go ahead and get to 25H2. If you are going from 23H2 to 25H2, it isn't a single upgrade. You perhaps may have to go from 23H2 to 24H2, from 24H2 to 25H2. And that is because the operating system's architecture was changed quite substantially between those versions. So unless you're planning on doing a full reinstall of the operating system, which is available and you can do it, you have to do a two small jumps to get you to 25H2. Once you are at 25H2, Microsoft has very kindly given us an enablement package. This enablement package is like a patch, and that effectively turns on the next feature update. So from 25H2 to 26H2, it's just a patch. Now you're wondering why the Microsoft updates are getting so large, and it's actually because they are slipstreaming multiple feature updates into the same patch. So in a 25H2, in a 24H2 or a 25H2 cumulative update, they may actually include the next feature updates files. And that means that through that patch deployment, you're actually putting those new versions on your systems so that enablement package can simply activate them. And the nice thing about the enablement package is that it can take as little as 15 minutes. So you deploy it just like you would a patch, reboot, and within 15 minutes, your system is at the latest version. We still have Server 2012 content until the end of this year, and that then will expire the 3-year subscription. Now, if you still have a long-term servicing branch which isn't available for purchase any longer, then you do get some additional support to 2030. But as I mentioned, that is not available anymore. So if you are on a pathway of feature update, please keep going. Dangers of not keeping the feature update in compliance isn't just from a Microsoft patching standpoint. Some antivirus products and security tools that protect you from a cyber perspective may demand and require that the feature update remains compliant. So when you fall out of compliance from a feature update perspective, the antivirus might stop working as well. It is a very serious concern. So if you haven't made your New Year's resolution already, let's get you to 25H2 as quickly as possible. And if you need any support, any recommendations or best practices, please do get in touch with us. Now, some highlights from Patch Tuesday. it might seem like a rather boring Patch Tuesday. We had 84 fixes, just 8 critical, 76 important. We had some that were vendor mitigated, which we'll talk about in a second. We had 6 that are more likely to be weaponized, no weaponization, no 0 days. We had 2 public aware vulnerabilities that we're going to talk about what the definition of that is in a minute, and 2 jump points. Jump points are a scope change. That's where a vulnerability that, if it can be exploited, allows you to jump out of the component of the security scope. For example, if you're exploiting a Hyper-V vulnerability, then perhaps you can jump from the guest to the host, or the host to the guest, or the guest to the guest. So you can see that that is an extremely serious type of vulnerability, but we only have 2, and that should be easy to resolve. Now let's take a look at our bug leaderboard. Now our bug leaderboard is very important for the theme of today's Patch Tuesday. Each of these bug types offer a different type of exploit that is possible, not whether directly or whether as part of an attack chain. That's where you have one vulnerability that leads into another. Now, we had 46 elevation of privileges fixed yesterday. That's a vulnerability that allows an attacker to gain higher permissions than they're authorized to have, such as a normal user having elevation to system or admin credentials. Through the elevation of privilege, you then have the ability to further deepen the attack chain. Remote code execution, well, that is the most serious. We have 17 fixes. That is a vulnerability that allows an attacker to execute arbitrary code on a target system to either via remote or via direct, often without any authentication, to exploit that system. It's usually considered the most dangerous because it can lead to full system compromise. We had 11 information disclosures. That's a vulnerability that allows unauthorized users to access sensitive information. And this has been used recently when reading the memory or the CPU memory of a system where perhaps passwords are being passed through. So if you can read those passwords in clear text, you can get both the user account and the password together, and that can be used in a exploit of its own. Denial of service, simply to bring the system or service unavailable. It's typically causing it to crash, hang, or consume excessive resources. Now, the last 2, spoofing and feature security bypass, look very similar. We had 4 spoofing vulnerabilities. That's a vulnerability that allows an attacker to impersonate another user, a device, or a system to gain trust or bypass security controls. And security feature bypass, we have 3 of those. That's a vulnerability that allows an attacker to bypass or evade a security mechanism, such as authentication, sandboxing, or exploit a mitigation. Now, I heard a wonderful analogy of these 2, why they look the same, but they are specifically and strategically different. Spoofing is like taking your friend's ID card and using it to get into a bar. So you're using an actual ID card and you're tricking the person to letting you in. A security feature bypass is breaking through the window. So you're still getting access to where you're not supposed to have, but you're using different techniques. And so both of those together are super serious. Just because they are at the bottom of the bug leaderboard does not mean that they are any less serious than any of the others above. Now, if you are looking for recommendations on a risk-based approach to selecting the vulnerabilities in your organization, regardless of the Patch Tuesday release and third parties, then perhaps this might be a recommendation to follow. So we use the vendor severity. The vendor severity is a source of truth. They decide the severity of a vulnerability. And typically it goes from critical, high, important, medium, low, and NA. Now, where they set the severity often can be quite confusing. When you look at the type of vulnerability, the exploit could be 0-day. Take the Mozilla Firefox or the Google Chrome browser that's just been weaponized. It can be interesting to see that the vendor has issued that as an NA severity. So we can't always trust and rely on the vendor severity as the only selection criteria. And as we talk about the pathways and the attack chain, we're going to see how these fit in to the bigger picture. The CVSS score is a calculation which uses scenarios that can include things like, is the user required to click something? Is the exploit available over the internet? How much damage can be caused if an exploit was to be made in your organization? And all of that calculation put together gives a score out of 10. 10 is the equivalent of critical and 0 is the equivalent of NA. And you have a lot of flexibility within the score itself. Because it's a number, you don't just have critical, high, medium, low, and important. You can have halfway scores as well. It allows you to be extremely granular. Now, when you put the two severities together, you do have a better understanding from an independent perspective, like what severity that vulnerability really should be. And typically that Google Chrome or that Mozilla Firefox browser would have a CVSS score of high or critical if it was being weaponized. Now, weaponized means it's under active attack through the vendor or the third-party partners, such as antivirus and cyber companies. They can detect the particular CVE is being used in an attack. When something becomes weaponized, it doesn't mean it's globally weaponized. It means somebody has used it in an attack. It's very, very useful to know that something is weaponized because it could happen to you. Public aware, on the other hand, is where the precise method or the blueprint to exploit that vulnerability has been put on the internet. Now, some companies spend an awful lot, maybe millions of dollars a year to bug bounty programs to help find threats in their software. And if the vendor is able to produce a patch quick enough, then the vulnerabilities that are fixed are just put into an update that we get each and every month. When that doesn't happen, and the public aware is now available on the internet, it generally means the vulnerability might not ever become weaponized because the vendor has decided, actually, I'm not going to fix that. It's too difficult. It has to have physical access to the USB, for example, meaning the risk is very low. That doesn't, however, mean it won't be. I certainly wouldn't want to be an IT manager or a security director that knew something was public aware and I didn't remediate it because it wasn't yet weaponized. These can change at any time. Keep an eye on your absolute console. If something does become weaponized, it will trigger. If you have automation in your solution, use the weaponized and public aware flags to trigger automatic deployment so that you don't have to worry about looking yourself through reports or through email outlets that something has been weaponized in a global attack. Now, countermeasures are our balance. This is a way of saying if there is a workaround or a mitigation, then perhaps I can deploy that countermeasure and not that 2 GB patch. For example, a countermeasure could be that you have a local service that you can stop. We're going to go into some examples like that later on. Could be a local policy, a local group policy. Could be a service that you may tweak the permissions of, or actually go into the registry and remove or add items that effectively can mitigate the risk. These can be deployed much, much faster than a 2 GB patch. Do pay particular attention, as we have had countermeasures this year where the vendor has recommended you remove the countermeasure once you've deployed the patch. So countermeasures are really useful vendor guidance to close the gap, secure the device, allowing you time to deploy the patch. do go ahead and, like I said, read those countermeasure requirements. Remove them if they recommend that you do so. And everything is based on your exposure. If you have a low severity vulnerability that is weaponized on 95% of your environment, then that is the priority over a critical vulnerability that is not weaponized on 50% of your environment, because the threat is much, much bigger when you put many of these items together. That is the value of having a risk-based approach. You're not just using one single object or one single severity to make your decision about your strategy. Now, on Patch Tuesday, we do upload our recommendations to our website. On absolute.com, you'll find our homepage where we talk not just Patch Tuesday, but how we can help you stop downtime in your organization. A resilient organization relies on people and technology, and when people and technology can come together, you can offer an extremely resilient organization that is able to recover in minutes from any kind of cyber incident. If you would like to talk more about that with us on how maybe our technology or through our support, we can help you in a 15-minute conversation, and we can go through all of the options available to you. On the resources section here, you'll find our Absolute blog. Our Absolute blog isn't just for Patch Tuesday, but it's insights into zero trust, into that resilient technology. Patch Tuesday, of course, recommendations on best practices on how to keep your environment up to date so that you can stay ahead of what's going to come down into your organization in the next update of your Adobe Reader, for example. Here you'll find our upload on Patch Tuesday, written by myself. Now we have 84 fixes to discuss, but I want to not talk about numbers this time. I'm not going to go into the CVEs like I do before. I really enjoyed explaining how each of the vulnerabilities influence the PC, but the broader picture is that there is a much larger risk when you put lots of these CVEs together. That is what I call a pathway or an attack chain. So from the 84 fixes we had yesterday, which covered everything from Microsoft to the Microsoft components, we had .NET fixes. We haven't had .NET fixes for a couple of months. Some of these fixes are bigger than they are on their own. And so what I'd like to do is to give you some examples and scenarios of where attack chains have been used to exploit or fully compromise an endpoint through something that perhaps was released as a medium or low or moderate rated severity. The first of these examples is the initial breach scenario. So this is the worst case scenario. Remote code execution is the most serious type of bug fix. Now, they can fully compromise the system over the internet, across the LAN, across the WAN. And they often attack services running on systems. Now, this doesn't just have to be servers. In fact, workstations that are sitting on a public hotspot could in fact have services that could also be attacked. Through a discovery, whether that's through a ping sweep, whether that's an actual purposely built network scanning tool, you discover devices that have this particular vulnerability on. Then you can target to exploit it. Here you can use the remote code execution, which launches ransomware, which gives you your initial compromise. And at that point, once they're in your system, they can either stay for a while, have a look around, put other devices into the same exploitate state, compromise your organization completely, and of course, at that point, they might launch the attack at any moment. Now, in this Patch Tuesday release, we had two examples of updates that follow this pattern. 25172, which is a Windows routing and remote access service vulnerability, and 26106, which is a Microsoft SharePoint. Now, initially, you might think you could perhaps have a SharePoint. It's very popular. If you have a SharePoint server that's internet facing, then you definitely need to install this patch. If you think that you have devices without Windows routing and remote access service enabled by default because you're not using it, then perhaps you don't know that in a default Windows template, this could be turned on or at least installed on your servers without your knowledge. Do a vulnerability scan, find the servers where this service is turned on. Even if it's not configured, it can still be used in this type of attack. Use the workflow-based builders you have to go and turn off the service, or better still, uninstall it if you don't need it. Now, we have examples of this type of threat before. In fact, within the last 10 years, we had Eternal Blue. Within the last 5 years, we had WannaCry, and they exposed services like SMB, where you were able to attack one system and move to another server or another device using the SMP services. Full system compromise. It was one of the largest threats that year when Eternal Blue and WannaCry actually had its first outbreak. My second, which I call a ransomware enabler. This is not generally used in a first step attack. Something has to happen in order to allow privilege escalation to take place. That's where a particular vulnerability allows an attacker with limited access to a system to be elevated to full control over that system. And once those privileges are obtained, attackers can harvest credentials at will, disable security controls in the environment, and obviously launch their ransomware or their full system compromise. These do come through phishing attempts, but not always. We do have some threats that come through social media. So do pay particular attention here. Users are the vulnerability in this scenario. 2 updates that follow this pathway. 25179, that's a Windows ancillary function driver for WinSock. We had 6 of those highlighted last year, and some of those were weaponized. And 24294, which is the Windows SMB, which was used in the WannaCry, as I mentioned. Now, more recently, Hive Nightmare within the last 5 years actually showed how attackers use that limited access of a user to elevate to full system compromise. So we're not just talking about theoretical threats. Actually, this has happened in the last 5 years. So let's resolve these vulnerabilities here, and let's not have another Hive Nightmare. Isn't it interesting how they always call them nightmares? Of course, for IT, it absolutely is. Next one is called the print nightmare, the ghost of print nightmare, the print spooler. Now, Windows services have always been used in attack, especially services that are on lots and lots of systems. In this case, Windows 10, Windows 11 operating system. The print spooler is probably, if not the most important service in any organization where printing is required. If you are printing to a network printer, if you're printing to a local printer, even if you're printing to a PDF, you may use the print spooler. It's a prime example of vulnerability that exists on pretty much every single operating system, and it can allow attackers to escalate privileges across your organization. So in this particular scenario, we do have 23669. It is a Windows print spooler vulnerability. Let's resolve that straight away. That's pretty much on every single Windows 11 machine. Now, if you have systems like kiosks or systems that absolutely do not require access to a printer, through the Absolute console, you can turn the spooler off. If you disable it or you make it not running, you're able to mitigate the issue so that this never actually ever impacts you. Of course, if you have printing in even the smallest form, even if you're downloading a PDF from a web browser for an expense report, it generally will require the spooler to be running. So to at least mitigate the issue, to allow you the time to roll out the update, go turn off the print spooler when it's not required. And lastly, the phishing entry point, the favorite, where the biggest vulnerability in an organization is the person between the keyboard and your seat. In this case, we have a couple of Microsoft Excel vulnerabilities that through, again, emails, social media, even chat tools that you're using within your organization, the sharing of files can allow a highly effective phishing campaign that can further exploit all the way up to full system compromise. Now, luckily for us, the three recommended here, 26107, 26108, and 26109, the Office Excel vulnerabilities, super interesting vulnerabilities actually. If you get to read those, they do not have a preview pane. Thankfully. However, we do have two Office vulnerabilities that do have preview panes that I'm going to recommend in just a second. Now, vulnerabilities that have happened within the last 5 years, such as for Lena, just show how malicious software documents can trigger that remote code execution. Again, it is part of a chain. If you can remove just one element of this chain, it will not lead all the way down to full system compromise. So it's important that you remove those links as soon as you can to keep your environment safer. Now, my key takeaway today is any of the vulnerabilities that are endpoint specific, the Windows 11 Office products, fast track the attack chain. The ones I've recommended, please make sure that they are remediated as soon as possible. Even if they are rated important, it doesn't mean that they are any less serious than critical. And lastly, if you can, build resilience into your environment so that in the event of a cyber breach, an incident, or a malformed patch that we are deploying to keep your environment safer, any end user disruption can be reversed or stopped at the point of that exploit so that you can restore your systems to a working state in minutes. And we can certainly help you. We are one of the only organizations in the world that has this technology. Please don't deploy updates in fear of disruption. Deploy those updates to prevent downtime. We have a download. This really cool PDF has been built by our marketing team to give you everything you need, the insights you need to make your decision. Your environment is unique. We put every update from Microsoft and the CVE on this section, put it into your tool set. How exposed that update is based on the order from top to bottom. Go ahead and put your action plan over here on the right-hand side. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is the priority that you will take over these updates to deploy them urgently to least urgent. We're not going to say not urgent. Because any vulnerability can be exploited, but certain vulnerabilities must be deployed first. Here, under the additional information, you'll find the workarounds or mitigations. If countermeasures exist, you'll find it written here. You'll also find some really useful information, such as vendor mitigation already. This is the favorite kind of update for me because I don't have to fix it. But Microsoft still likes to let us know that certain vulnerabilities have been found and that they have taken the action to solve it. These are more than not often web or Azure-based fixes. So they have already made the fix, which is great, but they're letting us know nonetheless. These two here, 26110, 26113, these are the pair of Office vulnerabilities that I mentioned. The preview pane is an attack vector here. It can lead to full system compromise because they are remote code execution vulnerabilities. They are both critical. They are both CVSS 8.4. And I suspect, considering Office is pretty much on every single machine, if these vulnerabilities become weaponized or public aware, expect the CVSS to go to 9.8 or even 10.0. Microsoft is, however, saying that exploitation is less likely. That is until it is exploited. So being proactive and getting these resolved quickly will save you hours and hours and hours of time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this is useful in the strategy. If you do need any support, do get in contact. We'd love to walk you through a best practice, perhaps, on how to manage your patching. And until April, I wish you happy patching.
Thanks, Rob. That was so useful. And it's fascinating to understand these attack chains. Why is this so important? Well, our good friends over at CrowdStrike have recently released their annual global threat report, and I'll quote directly from the press release here. The average e-crime breakout time fell to just 29 minutes in 2025, um, with the fastest observed breakout occurring in only 27 seconds. Adversaries are also actively exploiting AI systems themselves, injecting malicious prompts into generative AI tools at more than 90 organizations and abusing AI development platforms. So, that's pretty scary, especially as organizations aren't just using AI, but depending on it. All the more important that you're protecting your endpoints in the best way possible. And of course, we talk about Microsoft Patch Tuesday here, but Absolute Security's secure endpoint platform doesn't just manage and automate patching for Microsoft vulnerabilities. It helps you to make sure all of your operating systems and essential applications are secure. In addition to that, our patented firmware embedded persistence technology also makes sure that your security tools or the agents that you have running on your endpoints are installed and running effectively. And if the worst does happen, our rehydrate capabilities ensure that if the worst happens, you can recover devices at speed and scale wherever they are. We've just launched a new version of Secure Endpoint, and you can find out more about that on the blog. As Rob mentioned, if you're in need of specific advice about resilience or patching, then please contact us via the website or the QR code here. More information to give you. We've started posting our CISO, Resilient CISO episodes on YouTube as well, so you can find them there. And also, we will be very delighted to meet with you and talk with you at the RSA conference coming up, and you can book an appointment to speak with our experts via this link here. Okay, so thanks very much for watching us, and thanks to Rob. We really appreciate your time and feedback. Don't have nightmares, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, Rob.